Now, on the first point, it was obvious in the stories of my students that the teachers worked in ways to really support their cultural backgrounds. Um, I think this was evident in Helena's quote when she said, "Oh, the teachers helped me accept my Filipino background. They didn't mind that I was Filipino." In other words, she didn't feel threatened to be herself in the school. So there was this respect for students, cultural background, by letting them be themselves as Filipinos. And and in practice, the school also allowed them to use their ethnic language um, and to do their stuff as Filipinos in the school. And I'm saying this is because in some other schools in Hong Kong that I went to, um, they did not necessarily allow the students to use their home language. So they only allow the students to communicate in either Cantonese or English. But in this multi-ethnic secondary school, they allowed them to use Filipino and other ethnic languages, and that was very significant to the students. Now, musical practices. Now, this has something to do with the title of this presentation because musical practices appeared to be something that was quite unique among the Filipino students. So, I'm not suggesting that Indian students, Pakistani students don't play music at all. But when it comes to the Filipinos, playing music was something significant to them. It's significant in a way that it became their everyday practices at school, that usually occur during recess time or lunch time um, before a class begins. So what happens was that when one Filipino student starts to play the guitar and sing, other Filipino students would come together and sing along. And one student described this as something that would draw them together as Filipinos. So it really formed a kind of social relationship among themselves. It's only sort of it became an insider thing among the Filipinos. So another student actually put it more explicitly that when they come together as Filipinos, when they start playing music, the other ethnic students would stay away from them. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it's kind of a feeling that you can't fit in the conversation. So it's usually just them, the Filipinos, playing music together that really form their identities at the moment in the school. So as I mentioned just then, their identity has to do with their language use at school. So it was really significant for them to be able to use Tagalog in the school. Since Tagalog is something that allowed them to communicate with one another. So if a Filipino student could speak Tagalog, then other Filipino students could easily relate to them, even though some of them were not that fluent in Tagalog, but they could easily identify with the language or understand some of the joke at least. Now, on the other hand, when we talk about Chinese language, the Chinese language acted as a marker in their interactions or in their thinking, because for those who are more fluent in Chinese, they identify more strongly as a Hong Kong person. But then, for those who do not quite speak the language, they identify less strongly as a Hong Kong person. Um, so being able to speak Chinese language, it seems to be a source for them to become more of a Hong Kong person, so to speak. Now, surpassing ethnic borders, this has something to do with the meta position that I talked about just then. Okay, this is when they identify implicitly or explicitly as an ethnic minority person, because for them being an ethnic minority, they know that in that school it's full of ethnic minority students, and that's when they said I'm just the same as other ethnic minorities, we're here together, we're studying together, and we respect one another here, we don't mind whether they're Indians or Pakistanis. So, in other words, this is another level of social relationship that was forged between the Filipinos and the non-Filipinos in the schools, right? So in that sense, there was a shared value that the Filipino students identified with, right? That was that came from the cultural ethos of the school, because the school is um, very culturally supportive. Now, just some concluding thoughts based on this presentation and the findings that I've shown you here. So, what I'm really trying to do in this presentation is to sort of highlight the dynamics of the identity positions of Filipino students in a school. Okay, so as to understand more deeply how that dynamic um, in identity construction occurs within a specific setting and within a multi-ethnic school setting, all right? And because would be uh, I think we could imagine that for other ethnic groups it would be a slightly different story, but for Filipino students, we tend to see a very complex identity dynamics happening there. I mean, it's not just them about being Filipinos, but it's also about them being an ethnic minority and a Hong Kong person and Hong Kong people to some extent, depending on the kinds of cultural resources that they draw upon. So in terms of that dialogical self-notions here, we can see that their identity positions move from one direction to another. All right, so those are the dynamics that I would like to highlight, because these identity positions ultimately have to do with their ethnic language, their musical practices, and their Chinese language knowledge. So it's not just about their Chinese language per se, but other stuff that they do in the school. Okay, so that's pretty much about the points that I'd like to talk about. And if there are things that you would like me to clarify or to elaborate on, so please feel free to send me an email here at jcgube at hkcc at polyu.edu.hk. Now, I look forward to hearing from you so that the ideas here can be developed further. Thank you.